Okay. Well, again, good evening. And Centers for Spiritual Living's January theme is its global vision, which is a world that works for everyone and for all of creation. Our topic of this evening's talk is pain may be guaranteed, but suffering is optional. Pain may be guaranteed, but suffering is optional. Suffering comes from a state of mind. So where does this state of mind originate? Well, I'll tell you. We absorb this state of mind from our surroundings, our vast experiences, our families, our parents, our schools, our friends, and from race consciousness, also known as race mind. This is where one state of mind is created. This is where one state of mind becomes fashioned. So what we think about and what we focus on, our attention, is where the energy flows and becomes the essence of our state of mind. When I think of state of mind, I think of positive states of mind and negative states of mind. Now, living from a negative state of mind brings about into one's life experiences limitation of individual potentiality, stress, worry, a bondage of self-expression, and I can go on and on. Now, on the other side of the coin, living from a positive state of mind brings about in one's life experience a happy, unlimited, stressless, and worry-free existence. It enables one to experience the bliss-filled, miraculous life that is everyone's birthright. It's everyone's birthright, and we know this birthright is ours because of who we are, children of the divine, one with the divine vibration, one with the divine mind, and one with each other. Now, of course you want to hold on to the positive states of mind that you might be experiencing, and hopefully that you want to think differently about your negative states of mind. Now, by thinking differently about the negative state of mind, you will let go of suffering. You will let go of victimhood, which is when one feels that they are being harmed or being made to suffer under a certain circumstance or condition, living that poor me attitude. You would let go of resentment. You would let go of hate, which are feelings of displeasure or indignation at some act, some remark, or some person. By letting go all of that I mentioned, this is when one really becomes truly free. That's when one becomes truly free. Does that make sense so far? Okay, bear with me. So when one holds on to anger, and when one doesn't forgive, this is when the resentments and feelings of let's say, discord or hate arise. They're all causes that really help promote more and more that negative state of mind, that consciousness that has you shackled up, that consciousness that holds you back, that imprisons you. So, what does this hold you back from? What do you think it might hold you back from, having this state of mind? Anybody? Freedom of mind, which therefore, it holds you back from living the bliss-filled life. That is your birthright. That is your birthright. You know, suffering, getting back to suffering, that also results from our refusal to align with or comply with the laws of the universe. Now, those laws bringing into our lives just what we think about. Those laws bring into our life just what we say. So what we think about manifests in our life. And also what we verbalize can manifest in our life. They show up in form when we have those thoughts or those words, and that's when suffering results. So what you put your attention to, you get more of. Now, I found a quote in the Science of Mind text on page 110 I'd like to read to you. It says, "If we talk about discord, we shall become more discordant. The more the world arms for war, the more certain it is that there will be war. People who spend all their time talking about their unhappiness becomes unhappy." That's the end of the quote. So Jesus understood these great laws of cause and effect in the universe, which, believe me, at times, sometimes work with apparent slowness. But believe me, try and remember that these laws are always working, and always with assuredness. It was Mother Teresa who said, "Don't invite me to an anti-war rally, but instead invite me to a peace rally." By that comment, I believe she got it. Do you think so? She used her words carefully in where she was putting her attention. So again, suffering results for refusal to align with and comply with the laws of the universe, and that those laws bring into our lives just what we think about. And secondly, those laws require that form is always changing, so my advice is don't get attached to form. So we can change the way we think and what we think about, thus changing our experiences of life. The how is to remember that the form is always changing, but the joy never changes, the love never changes, the peace never changes. Only the form. Because really, joy, love, and peace, it's an inside job. Pain comes from attachment, as the Buddhists teach. So really, try not to have attachments to the outcomes of anything, because the form might be so different than what you expected. And sometimes it's so different it passes by us without us being even aware of something that would be good for us. Again, when we talk about being free, we truly, truly become free of the negative states of mind. And when we accomplish this freedom, we decrease the suffering in all of the world, and we also have a psychic and spiritual room to envision answers not only for ourselves, but for the whole world. Now, years ago, before I studied the SOM philosophy, I was the star of victimhood. I so easily went into that state of being. You know, I probably would have received an Oscar award for victimhood back then if there was such an award. I really would have. For me, becoming a victim released me of all responsibility of anything I did, because it was their fault. It was not mine. Have any of you been there? Have any of you been there? You too, Rev G, you've been there. Now, being the victim, because of that, I could easily X out people from my life. I had this was way before SOM, no problem. X you out like that. Unbelievable. And here's a quick little story. I had a very good friend years ago whom I found out did not hold confidence with any part of our friendship. Now, when I found this out, I, yes, became the victim, and I X'd the person out of my life. By me doing that, it caused me a lot of suffering. It caused me a lot of suffering because, again, I then went into that state of victimhood. The poor me, or why does all this stuff happen to me, etc. How dramatic of me it was back then when I think of it. I suffered because I was definitely not in alignment with the universe. Not at all. I became a prisoner. I became shackled. I became powerless. I became resentful. And I carried this on my shoulders for a long, long time. I also became sad, then depressed, very unhappy. See, you go right down the hole. And I put myself in such a negative state of mind, such a negative place. And unknowingly, by doing what I did, I chose a path of suffering, and it was a lot of suffering. Now, I didn't know at the time at all that I had the ability and I had the power to think differently, to change my state of mind, and to focus and direct my energy flow. But then after being involved with the SOM philosophy and realizing that it was me, it was I who was causing myself to suffer, I started to embody more and more who I was, and all the ability and power I had as being one with the One, a child of the divine. As this became more and more my state of mind, having the ability to choose, to change what I focus on, and to change my thinking, thus changing my life, then that is when I began to let go of suffering. The suffering became less and less. Our very, very dear friend, Reverend Cindy Grimes, always says, and I quote her, "Where attention goes, energy flows." So that flow of energy that we're talking about, do you want it to go towards positive thinking or negative thinking? That is your choice. It is up to you. It's up to each and every one of you.
Segue to me, clumsily. Excuse me. All right, so going on with this idea of, pain may be guaranteed, but suffering is optional. Which do you want? What would you like in your life? So our power lies in the facts that are found in the law of the universe, as Reverend Ed said. And so some of the facts of this law of the universe is, first of all, I am a part of an infinite mind, and my thoughts are being acted upon by the universal mind. So everything that I'm thinking or deeply believing, and especially if I put that emotion behind it, that gives it the kick to bring it into form. So if I can affirm things, but until I get to that point where the emotions are behind it, that's what brings it into form. So if I'm not really putting the emotion behind it, then sometimes the things that are showing up are not fully formed. I like to say that they show up in life and they're not fully formed. So we're talking about the law of attraction here. Wherever my attention is, as Reverend Ed said, it is putting that power into the universe of what I desire to have show up in my life. It's also the reciprocal nature of the universe, because the universe works in a circle. I can remember as a kid, my parents always saying, what goes around comes around. Anybody ever heard that one before, right? Well, I didn't get it then. I do now. I get that as I am putting out, it's coming back to me. And Ernest Holmes always said, that if you want friends in your life, then be a friend. If you want love in your life, then be love. So these are the things that we're using in this power to bring about what we desire. So we are no longer suffering. We are experiencing life on a more full and complete level. And the big thing about this law of the universe it is changeless. It works the same always. It never changes. It's always responding. I like to think of it as the universal servant. So what do I desire in my life? Well, then I make my order of the universe, and I make my order clear to the universe. Now, the only problem with this, if there is a problem, which I don't like to claim problems because I don't like to believe there are problems, there's only challenges for us to overcome, is that this power is working consciously or unconsciously. So sometimes what's going on in our unconscious or unchecked thoughts or unchecked beliefs, that's going into that law. So I may be affirming over here what I desire, but over here the law is also getting what's going on in the background, in the back of my head. So when we say that pain is guaranteed, what do you think I really mean by that? What do you think I mean by pain is guaranteed?
You're always going to face challenges.
Exactly. Is that not the nature of life? What is the one constant in life? Change. Right? And what is it that we hate the most in our lives? Change. Right? We hate going into change. We're taught that change is bad. That change is always going to bring a problem. At least that were some of the things that I learned. And like when Ed was talking about race consciousness, he's talking about like the universal idea. I work in a national call center, and they just recently changed the voice-guided system where people can get their automated account information to a woman's voice. And this woman came through to me and said, "I hate that woman. She talks down to me." And I thought, oh, okay. So I took her complaint, as I should, sent it up to whoever it needs to go to. But I thought it's so interesting because it's like, I named the original voice, which was a man's voice. I used to call him Bob Banker. And, I haven't got a name for the new woman voice yet, so I'm sure I will find one. But I have found so many people that don't like that change. And they changed the options that you can press on the phone to something different for what you want. So people are used to going in and doing a certain thing, and now it doesn't work. So it's funny how we just get into that place. It's like, no, this is how it's supposed to work. Now, technology is a great opportunity for us to change, right? Because it's constantly changing. It's constantly shifting. I remember putting a 5.5-inch floppy into a computer in order to boot it up. Now I just turn it on, right? So things have changed. They've moved forward, and I have to change with it. Otherwise, what's happening? I'm causing myself pain. I'm causing myself difficulty in my life, things that don't work. When I get stuck in something, it's like I can bring about all kinds of stuff into my life, and it can show up in some ways as dis-ease. If I am not working with something, then it can come forward as dis-ease, or as they call it in human language, disease. But my consciousness can be limiting me so that I can't move beyond things, and that stagnated energy can cause physical things that are going on in my life because I'm not moving forward with what's going on in me. So the great news about the universal law is that we are always at a choice to begin anew. We always have the opportunity to start anew, right from where you are. So wherever you may be in your life, you can always choose to say, I'm going to make a new choice today. And what that does is it disrupts that reciprocal nature of the universe. Because that reciprocal nature of the universe is going, oh, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. I'm going to bring that to you. And so when I say I'm going to make a new choice, what am I doing? I'm disrupting that circuit to bring about something new, to bring about a new way of being. What comes to mind for me is this story I heard a long time ago of a woman with multiple sclerosis. And for years and years and years, she prayed to heal her multiple sclerosis. I want healing of my multiple sclerosis. I want healing of this. I want healing of this. This was her constant prayer. And yet it seemed to never come to fruition. She had more and more limitation in her life coming from this dis-ease known as multiple sclerosis. And one day, somebody said something to her that really lit up a light bulb in her head. They said, "What do you really want to experience? What do you really want to experience?" And she had to stop and she had to think. And she said, "What I would like to be able to do is to be able to really do the things I love and not be limited by the multiple sclerosis." So she realized at that moment she needed to shift her idea of what her prayer was to be. Instead, she began to pray for having energy, time, ability, physical movement, all of these things. As she shifted this consciousness, it shifted her life. And at one point she realized that this thing called multiple sclerosis in her life was in remission. It was no longer limiting her life because she figured out, what is it that I want? And put that into the universe instead of multiple sclerosis. Because the universe was hearing, I don't want multiple sclerosis. But all the universe was hearing was multiple sclerosis. So in the same way, when we have things in our life that keep showing up, then what is it I want to experience? This is where you want to go with that. Go to that place, because the universe is always conspiring for your highest good. It always desires for you to have the good that you desire. Our problem is we sometimes get caught up in what we don't want instead of what we do want. So take the time to recognize what it is that you want. Ernest Holmes says, God never intended man to suffer. Suffering may be salutary in that it leads us to a place where we learn that it is unnecessary. We shall cease to suffer as we more and more comply with the laws of the universe. All suffering is the result of some infringement of these laws. So when we think we can go outside of the universal laws, it's like the universal laws go, oh yeah? That ain't happening. And it does that all the time. I've seen it so many times in my life. You know, Reverend Ed talks about his past. My past was the same way. I was very negative. I was one of those people in an office that you didn't want to be around because I was not a fun person to be around. Now I work in like a part-time position that is a very stressful type of a position. And yet what I bring to it is as much light as I can possibly bring, because I know it's important and it helps. And I find that everywhere, every place I go, that there are always smiles to meet me, that there is always happiness, that there's always how are yous. There's always that positive energy because I'm bringing my highest and best to that. So it doesn't matter whatever that may be, I can bring something good to it and I can bring it to a higher level. So if ever I find myself sinking into a place of worldly affairs, anybody been there? Worldly affairs, right? Watch the news. And it's amazing how quickly it can take you right down there. Who is it? Michael Beckwith. Dr. Michael Beckwith always says, you know, it's like whenever I need to look for a prayer list, I turn on the news, and I know what I need to pray for. So it's a good way to look at it. It gives you a much more optimistic look at that. So what I have to do is when that happens, I need to bring my awareness back to what I desire. I need to draw myself back into that place. What I desire is the spiritual truths: love, beauty, peace, joy, abundance, wholeness, completeness, a world that works for everyone. It sounds like a lofty, impossible kind of thing to do, but within each of us, once we find that spark, we inspire others when we have that spark for ourselves. And that's how that works. It's like the pebble in the pond and the ripple effect. It all comes out. So our call today, or my call to you, is to remove the thoughts that are causing you to suffer. Recognize them and release them. And when you release them, don't get all stuck on it, because I've done this myself, where like you get this thing, oh my God, why was I thinking that? And you put all this energy there and you don't want that. So you just say, oh, isn't that an interesting thought? I choose anew. I choose joy. So if I'm in a place of feeling depressed or negative, then I say, I choose joy. I choose joy in this moment. So that helps you to shift that consciousness. It's all about awareness. When we can get our awareness realizing what we're saying, what we're thinking, what we're doing, and start to work on the feelings behind that. And we do that through spiritual practice. Meditation, spiritual mind treatment, which is our form of prayer, or journaling, visioning, any of these different spiritual practices and tools that we learn here. You're able to do that, to find out what's going on in the background. Because sometimes we forget, or we don't realize. Or go to a practitioner. If it's something that's like this immovable feeling in your life, then go to a practitioner. That's the time to do the work with a practitioner. An hour with a practitioner is amazing and breaks down so many blocks in our lives. It's phenomenal. I've done it so many times on my own. Having been a practitioner, I've done it for others. It's very powerful. Still am a practitioner, actually. You never stop being that. So, what I would say is that, and I mentioned this before, as Ernest Holmes said, if you want a friend, then be a friend. So, if we become challenged with a situation, take a look at what you can do. When you see a challenge in your life, what can I do here? What ability do I have in this? Rather than looking at what I can't do. Because what's the first thing we do when we see a challenge many times? I can't do this, I can't do that, I don't have that, right? Instead, look at what you can do. Because what you've done is you've opened up a new channel. You've opened up for the universe to fill a space with much better energy, what you desire in your life. So we've learned all we need to know from suffering. I think we have. I think it's time to stop the suffering, especially for ourselves, because as I stop my suffering, what does that do for the world? It allows me to be the light to others. It allows me to bring forth a higher level of consciousness to others. So let's give it up now. As I make this shift, this causes the shift in the world. As each one of us makes this shift, it causes the shift in the world. For wherever you go, when you are in a place of opening up to your true magnificence, to the truth of who you are, then what is that bringing about around you, with everyone you work with all that you're involved in? It brings out a whole new level.